We're going to discuss Tara Reid and the sexual allegations that she made about Joe Biden, and kind of get into what Professor Zekus his point of view is on the reliability and the credibility of her statements as it pertains to what he's seen commonly in the field. But for a better backdrop of what we're going to talk about, more context, there was just last night, Don Lemon on CNN interviewed Stacey Abrams. Now, you may know Stacey Abrams from her gubernatorial run in Georgia. She's done a lot of work in the voter suppression area, been very effective there. So she was on CNN. They had a conversation. I'd like to share that clip with you. Then we'll come back and we'll have a conversation.
There is a sexual assault allegation against Joe Biden. The accuser, her name is Tara Reid, tells CNN that the alleged incident happened in 1993 while she was working as an aide in Biden's Senate office. She is claiming that she was delivering Biden a duffel bag and says that Biden had her up against the wall in a corridor on the Hill and violated her with his fingers. Now, CNN has now spoken on the record with her former neighbor, who says Reid told her about the allegation within a few years of the alleged incident. Biden's campaign says untrue, never happened. Is this a credible allegation?
I believe that women deserve to be heard, and I believe that they need to be listened to. But I also believe that those allegations have to be investigated by credible sources. The New York Times did a deep investigation, and they found that the accusation was not credible. I believe Joe Biden. I believe that he is a person who has demonstrated that his love of family, his love of our community has been made perfectly clear through his work as a congressional leader and as an American leader. I know Joe Biden, and I think that he is telling the truth and that this did not happen.
So in 2018, you tweeted it was shameful that Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination was being rushed forward and survivors of violence like Christine Blasey Ford deserve to have their voices heard. Are you applying a different standard now?
Not at all. I believe then and I believe now that women deserve to be heard because too often they are not. And Tara Reid deserved to have her story listened to and investigated. What was happening to Christine Blasey Ford was that there was no investigation. There was a rush to move the conversation forward so that no investigation was conducted. And as I said, I believe that those allegations needed to be investigated. And I believe that the New York Times and subsequent reports support what the Biden campaign has said. And I believe Joe Biden.
So you said you've heard her, you've heard enough, you don't believe her, you believe Joe Biden.
No, what I'm saying is that the New York Times investigation of her allegations, the New York Times investigation does not support the accusations against the vice president. I believe the Biden I know, and I think that he will make women proud, that he will make America proud.
Does Joe Biden personally need to address this more directly and publicly?
I believe his campaign has been very clear, and I believe that that is the approach that they intend to take. And I support the approach because, again, we don't want women to ever be afraid to come forward, but we also have to recognize that allegations should be investigated and that those investigations need to be borne out.
Stacey Abrams, thank you for your time.
Professor, what do you think? What are your first thoughts after watching? First of all, I apologize for having to make you sit through that. I thought it was horrible, but what are your thoughts about Stacey Abrams speaking, what she said there about Tara Reid's story?
Stacey Abrams continually contradicts herself. She starts out by saying, we need to believe all women, and then she says, well, I don't believe Tara Reid. And her reason is because she said she believes Joe Biden. That's the first thing that she said. Well, first of all, Joe Biden has never been asked and has never come out with a statement on the rape allegations, the credible rape allegations against him. That's the first thing. So at the end, she corrected it and she said, well, I believe Joe Biden's campaign. So first of all, I think, there has to be a reckoning with why the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party has not been asked by one media interviewer about these credible rape allegations. So that's the first thing. And she kind of glosses over that. And then she says, well, I've heard about these allegations and I looked at the New York Times, which did a credible investigation, a thorough investigation, and they concluded that these allegations don't have merit. That is not true. In fact, the New York Times article, which let's talk about that article for a minute. It was edited by recommendation of the Biden campaign, because they didn't like the fact that the New York Times originally talked about the fact that Joe Biden has been accused publicly from 8 women of inappropriate touching, kissing, and caressing without consent.
Right.
Right? They took that part out. They didn't do a thorough investigation. However, they even admitted in their article that a friend of Tara Reade's corroborated that in 1993, contemporaneously, that Tara told her about the rape in detail. But that fact was buried at the bottom of the article. The mainstream press has had weeks and weeks to investigate this, and they didn't. The people that we have to thank for this story coming out are people like Katie Halper, who had the courage to put Tara on to tell her story in her own words. Side note, and I want to ask this to Stacey Abrams, have you listened to the full hour-long interview on the Katie Halper show where Tara Reade talks about, in her own words, how Joe Biden raped her in 1993? Because if you haven't listened to that entire interview, you shouldn't be commenting on it.
Yeah, I totally agree with this, your summation. And I'm going to tell you, man, I find it insulting, frankly, that she would, throw a woman under the bus this way. I mean, she didn't, as Don Lemon pointed out. And look, let me give credit to Don Lemon here. Not something I get to do that often, Professor, But, hey, Don Lemon did his thing here. He actually cornered her on a couple things. He brought up the fact that she's being inconsistent, that back when Dr. Blasey Ford had a hearing with Brett Kavanaugh, first of all, she was given a hearing. We haven't seen that for, they didn't even want to pretend that Miss Tara Reade even existed. Like, no one even wanted to have this conversation until well after. And I think it had to coincide with Bernie suspending his campaign. I think that's the only reason why this ever saw the light of day. This is insulting, man, to me, that she would not give this woman any credibility. And once again, I agree with you that the interview that she gave with Katie Halper was to me, that's what got me, if I believe, I believe Tara, is that interview. What about you?
Yeah, and, bring a good point. The mainstream press waited. And think about this. The New York Times article came out on Easter Sunday, right? After Bernie dropped out. So, they obviously waited. They punted. They didn't want to deal with this. But when they felt comfortable that they could at least say, well, now nobody can criticize us and say we didn't talk about it. We talked about it. Let's move on. And here's the thing. You bring up the Blasey Ford thing. And yeah, I'll give Don Lemon credit. He asked her and showed Stacey Abrams her own words where she supported Blasey Ford's allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. Let's talk about those just briefly. There is way more evidence supporting Tara Reade's claims of having been raped by Joe Biden than there ever was for Blasey Ford. And I will say this, I believed Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. I went on local news media and said as much. I tweeted about that. And there was even less evidence. Contemporaneously, Tara Reade told her brother, her mother, and a friend at the time it happened. Her mother is now deceased, but we saw the Larry King clip, which showed that her mother called in and said her daughter had a problem with a prominent senator, right? And so those three have corroborated, and now these 2 other neighbors coming out. That never happened with Blasey Ford, And my thing is, I heard Blasey Ford in her own words, and I said, she sounds like somebody who'd been traumatized. I believe her, and I'll tell you this about Tara. I've worked with many victims of sexual violence, both adults and children, in my career, and Tara Reade sounds like so many victims of sexual violence that I have heard. Her story rings very true. And I should also add, I've spoken to Tara at length about her story. And it is clear to me that she is telling the truth.
Wolfpack.